What's up, you guys? Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB, and welcome to the Awesome MTB Ultimate XC Bike Shootout. Oh my God. Honestly, you guys, this is probably every enduro rider's dream XC bike. This thing is absolutely insane. What's going on, you guys? Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB, and welcome back to the Awesome MTB XC Buyer's Guide. Over the last few weeks, we have been testing out 7 of the best XC bikes on the market and trying to figure out who each bike is for and what is the ultimate XC bike. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the Transition Spur, probably the rowdiest bike in this buyer's guide. When this bike was presented to me, I was all like, how does this fit into the XC buyer's guide? But I was reassured that this bike was going to be a blast both uphill and downhill, so here we are. Before we get into the review of the Transition Spur, I do want to give a huge thank you to the shop that we teamed up with for this buyer's guide, and that is Pro Bike Supply. Going into this, we knew we needed to team up with an awesome shop, and they were the first ones that came to mind because they specialize in custom builds. They have so many awesome brands to choose from, and they make sure to make your dream bike a reality. You can basically customize anything you want with them, and on top of that, they have professional mechanics that build your bike shop, and they are authorized to ship all over the country, so you can rest assured that your dream bike will be delivered to you in amazing condition. On top of having some of the best brands to choose from, they also take care of friends of the channel, so if you're in the market for your next bike, be sure to hit up Pro Bike Supply and they'll help make that dream into reality. Link all of their stuff in the description of this video, and with that being said, let's get into the Transition Spur review. Once again, you guys, the Transition Spur is technically a cross-country bike. It falls in the 120mm travel category that this buyer's guide had. The build that I have been testing actually comes in just shy of 26 pounds, and it's actually not the heaviest bike in this buyer's guide. So talking about the bike that I have been testing, this is a size extra large Transition Spur. Once again, it has 120mm of front travel and 120mm of rear travel. Personally, am 6'2". This thing definitely is a proper XL. It actually has the longest reach as well as the longest wheelbase of this buyer's guide. I have a RockShox sit up front, and in the rear have the stock Fox float rear shock that comes with this thing. Both are non-remote lockouts. For the drivetrain, we have the older AXS X01 drivetrain on here. For wheels, we have specialized carbon Roval wheels on here. It's just make sure that every bike in this buyer's guide had carbon wheels. We actually do have a little bit more of an aggressive tire profile on here. We have ground controls up front and ground controls in the rear. We really were trying to replicate a stock build from Transition, and that's also why we ended up going with 800mm handlebars on here. Because yes, even though the Transition Spur is a 120mm bike, it does come with 800mm bars stock, especially in the size extra large frame. I'm going with DD carbon bars on here, and we have SRAM G2 brakes. We have a 1-up dropper post on here, and we actually have a specialized Mimic bridge saddle. Now, the frame itself actually only has room for 1 water bottle. So now that we've talked about the build that I've been testing, let's get out on the trails and show you guys just how much of a fun bike this bike is and what I think about it in terms of it being an XC bike. Let's talk about the bike a little bit. This is the Transition Spur, and it actually has 120mm of travel, so it's in this travel category of this buyer's guide. It also comes in at about 26 pounds, which also is in the weight category, but I can truly say this bike rides nothing like any other bike in this buyer's guide. I feel like I've had this bike for a few weeks now and I don't understand it. It just continuously shocks me everywhere. I'm gonna be so stoked to not have to climb this climb for a while. But as you guys can tell, the Transition Spur, no problem. Definitely a steeper seat angle than some other bikes in this test. And you could tell when you get on this, Transition wants you to climb some steep mountains. The bars on this are very wide, 800 mils. The Transition Spur actually comes stock with 800 mil bikes. So I feel like that gives you a little bit of an indication of what Transition was going for when they were designing this bike. And for downhill, where the Transition Spur clearly shines. Oh my God, this thing is unfairly, such an unfair disadvantage over the other bikes. This thing literally is a monster truck. Nice. Wheelbase on this, definitely one of the longest wheelbases in the test. It is a proper XL, so much so that I actually thought this was a 2XL when I first picked it up. Coming through here. is also my first time on a transition bike and experiencing their giddy up suspension. There is something so magical about how the suspension feels on the trails. You can tell what Transition was going for. And I feel like they were trying to make a short travel bike that still rips all the freaking gnarly trails they want to ride, but just in a short travel platform. Borderline freaking slippery. That's how much coastal marine layer we got overnight. So good. I'm gonna be careful here that I don't slip down these rocks. God, this spur is so composed. And I do feel such a different feeling over the other bikes. After a downhill like that, I'd expect this bike to be like, okay, definitely gonna be leaning a little bit more on the kind of trail enduro, borderline enduro side of the spectrum in terms of confidence. But then when you're pedaling this thing and you get out of the saddle, it still pedals very efficiently. Now, I will also say this has probably been the bike with the most amount of traction on technical climbs. If you're an enduro rider looking to get an XC bike, this probably is gonna be the bike for you. All right, rocket trail. And I do have to say, in and out of corners, this thing freaking slashes so hard. You can definitely tell they like to have a good time on the downhills. Literally, it's mind-blowing, 120 millimeters of travel. Yet I truly feel like this is almost the same feeling as some of my enduro rigs. Oh my God, the rocks are probably pretty slippery right now, so I am gonna be a little cautious. Through the chatter tester, how does the bike do? Freaking amazing. So confident inspiring with that long reach and long wheelbase. That 66-degree head angle definitely helps out. And also the frame. I will say some bikes in this test, I could definitely tell the companies tried making the frames as light as possible. This frame literally is gonna stand any trail that I want to take it on. And no doubt in my mind or feeling that this frame isn't strong. This is a very strong frame, and you can clearly tell Transition doesn't want you to ever feel like your bike is holding you back. At this point, it is purely the rider. I'm coming through these little last corners. Once again, you guys, the fun factor, there's no shortage of that on the Transition Spur. Hi, and I am getting kind of curious, where is the limit for this bike? Because I don't feel like I got anywhere close to it during this test, and I have taken it on some trails that definitely are not XC friendly. I feel like you really have to push this bike to find its limit, which is crazy for a 120 millimeter downcountry bike. Let's go give you guys the final breakdown of the Transition Spur. All right, you guys, hopefully you enjoyed that ride. As you guys could tell, I would actually say the Transition Spur, it's not an XC bike. At the end of the day, I really don't think it wants to be labeled that. Out of all of the bikes in this buyer's guide, you could clearly tell that Transition's goal wasn't to make the ultimate XC bike. They wanted to make a short travel bike that was fun and still capable to take down all of the trails that they absolutely love. Now, let's talk about some things that I love about this bike, some things that I don't love, and some things that I think you want to be aware of before you buy this bike. In terms of things that I absolutely love about this bike, the sizing. So many times I see companies go with an XL bike and you end up riding it and you're like, this is not an XL. They go a little bit more conservative on the numbers. Transition went with a true XL, and you could tell both in the reach numbers as well as the overall wheelbase, this thing is a dedicated XL bike. There is so much reach, and if you're a taller rider out there, I think you really are going to appreciate that. Another thing that I love is the Geo. The Transition Spur had the most similar ride feel in terms of body positioning on downhills as longer travel bikes I've tested out in the past. Now, what that allows you to do, I feel like if you're a rider out there that you spend a lot of time in your enduro rig and you're just looking for that short travel rig, you can hop on this and rest assured that's not going to be a completely new learning process to riding a short travel rig, even though this bike still has the benefits that a short travel rig would have. Another thing that I absolutely love about this bike is the giddy up suspension platform. I did feel like there was a very good pedaling platform on here. I felt like it did have a nice snappy feel both in and out of corners, and especially when you got out of the saddle and really started putting the power down, I felt like the bike had a very good acceleration, but I could also tell that there was a lot of traction on technical style climbs. Another thing that I really loved about this bike is I really did feel a bottomless feel from that 120 mils of travel. I really did feel like the suspension as a whole had a very consistent stroke, and once again, you guys, that ending stroke, I really felt like it was more than a 120 mil bike, and I would actually say this bike felt like it had the most amount of travel, even though once again, you guys, it is a 120 mil travel bike. Now, let's talk about some things that I didn't necessarily love. It doesn't have that XC style pedaling position, if that makes sense. Kind of putting the power down, it still kind of feels a little bit more enduro bike-esque, and you don't necessarily feel as motivated to get in that cross-country pace stance on this bike. I do think that was something that is relatively expected. Once again, you guys, this bike is the slackest out of the bunch in terms of just a stock setting. Another thing I did notice is, once again, you guys, going back to that kind of race pace mentality, I don't think this bike, even though it's very capable downhills, I don't think it wants to be the first one down. I think it wants to have the most amount of fun, and it wants to get as sketchy as possible, boost sections that the other bikes aren't going to be boosting. At the end of the day, get to the bottom of the trail whenever it wants to get to the bottom. It's not in a race to get there, and I definitely feel like this bike, you ride a little bit more so off of the back end, if that makes sense. Very similar to other long travel bikes. Some other things to note that I didn't necessarily like about the build, this isn't Transition's fault, this is actually a wheel set that we went with. It does have Onyx hub. It basically engages as soon as you go to pedal. I never thought I could have too much engagements on my hubs. I love Industry 9 Hydra hubs. I did feel like these were borderline a little bit too much engagement. It was just basically as soon as you go to pedal, it just kind of moves, and I didn't necessarily love that feeling. Once again, you guys, I didn't know that you could have too much engagement, but I definitely think I found my limit with the Onyx hubs. But other than that, in terms of the actual bike, there's not too many things that I didn't love about this bike. I truly was blown away just how capable this bike felt. And like I said, in the riding portion, I definitely feel like the frame itself feels very sturdy when you're out on the trails. You're never second guessing yourself. You're never like, oh man, I'm just on my XC bike today. I feel like you don't have an excuse. I didn't find that this bike had that XC personality that the other bikes in this travel category had. Even though the other bikes do share geo characteristics as this bike, I definitely felt like, once again, you guys, this was a very comfortable bike, especially if you're coming from a longer travel rig. It just has a shorter travel platform at the end of the day. If you guys have any questions about the Transition Spur, let us know in the comment section. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, you guys, ride awesome.